Russian propagandists are finally losing their minds because the Russian economy is collapsing and their paychecks are shrinking. The financial damage has become so severe that in just a month, the Ukraine conflict, which was supposed to be a 3-day special military operation, will officially have lasted longer than Russia's entire World War II, the Great Patriotic War, as they call it. For Russians, this war has been devastating. Economically, the Russian oil and gas revenue has dropped more than 20% just this year, and almost half in December already. For average citizens, this means terrifying new reality. Almost 40% of Russians don't have enough money for food. The government is clawing back bonuses from soldiers on the front lines and refusing to pay people what Putin has promised them. And on top of that, more than 60% of regions in Russia are crumbling. They don't have money to fund vital projects like hospitals. This is why highly paid propagandists and CEOs are now publicly scrambling to address the negative trends in the economy as they realize Russia is falling far behind its own allies. So let's start from the beginning. Let's look at the dramatic economic fallout that's threatening Russia. Here we have a Russian propagandist who talks about how bad the Russian economy is compared to allies like China and India. Take a listen. We must fulfill all our obligations, and for that we need money. But where do we get the money if our economy isn't growing at the pace the country needs? Where do we create jobs? Where is the profit that companies will pay from? What will they pay taxes? They need to earn if they operate at a loss. What will that achieve? They will start cutting staff, and if they cut staff, then fulfilling social obligations becomes impossible. That means an additional burden falls on the state. And where will the state get the money if we aren't generating it? If the goal is to cool down the economy, how can we then meet all the obligations the state takes on? How can we develop the country, develop people? How can we create an investment climate if you just sit idle? The very phrase invented by our people, a balanced growth trajectory, is flawed. It's absolute newspeak, which really just indicates one thing: the inability of these people to recognize the challenges of today. That's why the president keeps saying that our task is to grow faster than the global average. We visit India, their growth is higher. We visit China, their growth is higher. Have you ever heard the leaders of China's or India's financial institutions say something like, oh, we need a balanced growth trajectory, or growth is very harmful? That's impossible by definition. Now, this is where most people forget that economic problems are actually humanitarian problems. Doesn't matter the country you're living in, because when economy isn't growing, people suffer, and a lot more people suffer than they would have otherwise. That applies even in a country like Russia, where the living standards aren't so high to begin with. 1/3 of the Russian population doesn't have indoor plumbing, and I don't mean to be disrespectful towards Mexico at all, but Russia pretends to be a superpower. But living standards for their population is comparable to that of Mexico. And this year, those living standards have fallen a lot because, let's be honest, the economy is not doing as well as it should be doing if it wasn't for the war. Looking at some numbers, the Russian budget for the first 11 months of 2025 oil and gas revenues are down more than 20%. That's more than 35 AF. And remember, November was the first full month after the new sanctions were announced on October 26, 2025. So in November, the oil and gas revenue actually fell by 34%, and in December so far, it seems to be on track to fall by 50%. Now, if I'm being honest, this will likely recover a little bit because with time, Russia and its allies will figure out some way to get around some sanctions. But as we have mentioned before, sanctions are like a noose around the economy. The more sanctions we put on, the tighter the noose becomes. Doesn't mean the economy will not be able to breathe, but it's going to be a lot harder breathing with more and more sanctions. And on top of all this, let's not forget, all the while the Russian exports are going down, the price of Russian oil is also going down. So Russia is exporting less, and it's making less per barrel of that export. In fact, since October, the price of Russian oil has fallen by almost 18%. That's roughly 1.5. Because of all this, Russian revenue for the whole government has dropped for the last 3 months of the year. And on top of that, the expenditures have actually gone up 12% because Putin keeps sending more and more people to the front lines. This all is a sign of a bigger issue that's happening inside Russia, and that is that people don't have money. A lot of the government money is just through exports or taxes. But when people don't have money, they don't earn a lot. They don't spend a lot, and taxes follow too. Take a look at this report from state-owned Russian newspapers talking about how 40% of Russian people don't have enough money for food. How strong is the Russian economy right now? Well, the government paper Российские leads on slowing inflation, claiming that in late November and early December, the rate of growth in prices slowed to unusually low levels for this time of year, so 5%. And Visa Gazeta reports poverty rate in Russia hits record low 5% of the population below the poverty line. But how exactly is this poverty rate calculated? When Vizme provides the details, the situation becomes clearer. To officially be above the poverty line, an average income of around only 17 zlotys and rubles per month per person is required. That's around 250. According to sociologists, more than 40% of working Russians surveyed admit they either barely have enough money or do not have enough money before payday to buy food and essential goods. Kommersant reports on the crisis in the Russian metals industry. The metallurgical industry remains in one of the most protracted crises in its history. By the end of 2025, steel production in Russia will fall to 66.5 million tons and consumption to 38.9 million tons. The situation is exacerbated by low export profitability and sanctions pressure on Russian producers. This reminds me of a joke my dad used to tell me. There was a city where there was a lot of rain happening, and they had a marking on a bridge showing when the rainwater is at dangerous levels, meaning the flooding is at a dangerous level. And when the water did hit that level, everyone contacted the mayor of the city, and the mayor shows up to the bridge and just raises the level at which flooding is considered dangerous. That's exactly what's happening in Russia right now. When too many people fell below the poverty line, they just lowered the poverty line. So not a lot of people are actually below it, statistically speaking, but in reality, the people are struggling and the economy is struggling. And this is despite the fact all the planning Russia had done for this war. They had built up a war chest that took them almost a decade to build up for this invasion. But even despite that, Putin did not prepare for this war to last this long. That's why, as I said in the start of the video, in roughly 50 days, this war would have been going on for longer than the Great Patriotic War that Russia fought during World War I. And this is such a shock for the Russian population that even Russian propagandists are talking about it, and they're calling it out. Take a listen. Yes, of course, it's great that Moscow and other regions put up photos of heroes on billboards, but that's endlessly insufficient and on TV. What do you see when you turn it on? Lisa Delina covering Instasama's song. I have a lot of respect for Larissa Delina, but this is disgusting. Maybe it's a deep fake and not true, but that's not the point. Change the names. In a few weeks, the length of this war will equal that of the Great Patriotic War. Why didn't we achieve the same results? Because not the whole country is fighting. The Supreme Commander is fighting. The government is fighting. The presidential administration is fighting. The governors are fighting, but further down, are you spoiling people's mood? It's New Year. Our problem is not at the front. It's in the rear, and something needs to be done about it. Smirch is needed. Now, it seems like Russians have forgotten that the reason they were so successful during World War II was because they got so much equipment and weapons from the United States. And that's the part that Russian history doesn't really talk about anymore. But anyways, even now money is a problem for the Russian economy because we're seeing government cancel commitments that they have publicly announced. The first one is, of course, we covered a few videos ago, was that the government had promised soldiers these big bonuses, literally making soldiers millionaires overnight in rubles. But when these soldiers got to the front lines in October, government went back and clawed the money out of their bank account, which is just insane. You don't want to be messing with people with guns. But now we're seeing more and more of this happening in the region of Kursk, after Russia bombarded the whole city because they wanted to push out the Ukrainian troops. Putin promised all the residents that he will pay them back for all the houses they lost. Well, it seems like Putin is not really fulfilling that promise. Here we have the report on that. There is another protest happening in Russia. Residents of the K region are demanding the payments Putin promised them. In response, an advisor to the local governor stated that residents of the border areas should have defended their homes themselves. Local channels have deleted the news about the protest, and the woman from Kursk who appealed to Putin has been detained. Here's the clip of her getting mad because the government was basically telling these people, hey, we started this war, but you should defend yourself. You can see why the population is mad. Did you say that? We had to defend ourselves, right? And who said, she said, you said that? Listen to me. Yes, I said that. And how are we supposed to defend ourselves? Then repeat, please. I'll record on the phone that men should protect their homes. I'll repeat. Yeah, explain it. Then why did you withdraw the soldiers? Repeat. I will record again. They left the young men at the border. They didn't leave them. Lena, my son was standing there, and a month before the invasion, part of it was taken away. They were driving, transporting cannons, and we're seeing similar signs of, let's call it, money shortages in other regions of Russia too. In Russian region of Kamatska, authorities had promised to open a new hospital building. But once the special military operation began, the entire budget was redirected to the operation. Now ordinary Russians have to receive treatment in a hospital with basically messed up building. War. This just shows war is obviously more important to Putin than the well-being of his population. This is the treatment room. Everything is in a sad state. The toilet is closed. It got clogged 2 months ago, and our request to have it unclogged was denied. Parents with children, as well as we ourselves, have to go to the toilet on the first floor. It's very cold on the stair landing. Yet, the children have to go there. It's simply impossible to stay here anymore. One wall above the window and above the door has already fallen apart. The second one is now peeling off in layers. From morning till evening, we have to use a heater. According to the management of the medical facility, the move to the new clinic is scheduled for mid-December. During the inspection, several violations were identified. There are especially serious concerns about the equipment being delivered. We are keeping this facility under supervision. Now, this is where I want to talk about the incentive structure in Russia's local government one more time. That's because you see local officials, mayors, governors, they don't really care about the population they're supposed to represent. Because in Russia, these people are not elected by the local population. In fact, they're appointed by Putin. So he basically tells who's going to be the head of the regions. And that's something that Putin changed once he became president in 2000, because he wanted more control over the Russian state. And because of that, the local officials don't really care about if people complain about anything. The only thing they care about is pleasing Putin, because at the end of the day, he's the one appointing them. That's why when this special military operation started, a lot of these regions started giving out big bonuses. But that bonus money was not coming from the Kremlin. In fact, the local officials were taking the local budget and redirecting a big portion of that budget just to the soldiers, just to give out bonuses so they can hit the target that the Kremlin was setting for them in terms of recruitment. And you can see why the population is not happy about this, because this money was